What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Israel Adesanya, 21 wins and 1 loss, defending his UFC middleweight title against Robert Whittaker, 23 wins and 5 losses. This is Israel Adesanya's 4th title defense of his middleweight title, a title that he won off of Robert Whittaker back in October of 2019. He stopped Whittaker in the 2nd round after basically nearly stopping him at the buzzer to end the 1st round. So it's kind of like Whittaker got knocked out twice in one fight. Now, Robert Whittaker, as I said, was a former champion, and the turning point in his career, I thought, was when he stopped big favorite at the time, Ronaldo Jacare Souza, and that's kind of what put Robert Whittaker in position to start fighting for what was then an interim title when he was having battles, those 2 back-to-back fights against Yoel Romero. Now, Whittaker won both of those fights. He won them both by 5-round decision, but I truly believe that those 10 rounds, especially in the 2nd fight against Yoel Romero, which was basically fight of the year for that year. This is back in 2018 was the 2nd time they fought. I felt like that 2nd fight took so much out of Robert Whittaker. He started having, health issues after the fact. It basically kept him out of the cage for over a year. Whittaker was supposed to fight Kelvin Gastelum and ended up getting a really bad intestinal issue that put him in the hospital on the day of the fight. So there were just a lot of things in Robert Whittaker's career around the time of that 2nd Yoel Romero fight and afterwards that made it kind of, easy for us to pick Israel Adesanya when they fought for Whittaker's title. So Adesanya, coming into that title challenge against Robert Whittaker, was just riding a wave of, sustained success. And he had several fights, like within a 2-year period. So when he hit the UFC and took it by storm. He basically had early wins against Rob Wilkinson, Marvin Vettori, Derek Brunson, Brad Tavares. Oh, it was Tavares, then Derek Brunson. And then he fought Anderson Silva in a fight of the night. It was a 3-rounder, close competitive fight, but Israel Adesanya beat an aging Spider, if you will. And then he has that classic against Kelvin Gastelum, and it was for the UFC interim middleweight title. And this was a back and forth fight where heading into the 5th round, it was anybody's guess who was going to come out on top between Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. Well, Adesanya won the fight. He won the 5th round big, almost stopped Gastelum in the 5th. And then he fights Robert Whittaker for the title, stops Robert Whittaker, as I mentioned, and then he had a lackluster but successful title defense against Yoel Romero, Adesanya did, and then he fought Paulo Costa this was one of his best performances. He stopped Costa in the 2nd round, just totally schooled Costa. Costa seemed like he had no idea how to get his engine started against Adesanya. Adesanya just basically pitched a shutout or near shutout and stopped Paulo Costa. And then he tried to become champ by going up to 205, fighting Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz defended his light heavyweight title successfully against Adesanya. And the first 3 rounds in this fight were very competitive. And then Blachowicz scored 2 very key takedowns in the 4th and in the 5th round to seal the deal and to beat Adesanya via unanimous decision. Big takedowns in the 4th and 5th round by Blachowicz against Adesanya. So Adesanya basically suffered his first MMA loss against Blachowicz. And again, it wasn't at middleweight. It was him daring to be great, basically going up and challenging Blachowicz at 205. Well, after that fight, he had one more title defense, and that was in June of 2021 against Marvin Vettori, who himself was surging at the time. And Adesanya, it had an impressive title defense win. It wasn't like a bunch of fireworks. It wasn't spectacular. It was kind of a workman's effort in securing a unanimous decision win over the very durable, extremely durable Marvin Vettori. And on Whittaker's side, since losing to Adesanya and therefore losing his belt again in October 2019, Robert Whittaker returned to the cage just under a year later. So, as much time as he had after that loss to Adesanya, it still wasn't as much time that he spent out of the cage as he did after the second Yoel Romero fight leading up to the Israel Adesanya fight. So Robert Whittaker wanted to make it a point not to have that much time out of the cage after getting stopped by Adesanya. So Robert Whittaker returned to the cage and rattled off 3 consecutive wins against Darren Till, Jerry Cannonier, and Kelvin Gastelum. And, you know, you can make the argument that those post-Adesanya wins for Robert Whittaker against Till, Cannonier, and Gastelum might have even been more impressive than his lead up to securing the title in those wins against Derek Brunson, then Jacare Souza, even though, again, that stoppage against Souza was huge, and then those back-to-back super close decision wins. Very tough fights against Yoel Romero. I mean, Robert Whittaker might be as good as he's ever been right now. I mean, same thing could be said potentially for Adesanya, and it's kind of interesting when you think that Adesanya is actually a year older than Robert Whittaker, just because of how long it seems we've been seeing Robert Whittaker in the cage. I mean, I remember back when he was at welterweight 170, when he had lost to Court McGee and then got stopped by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. This is back in 2014, so Whittaker's one of these guys who joined the UFC very, very young. And basically his age, in my opinion, is not reflected or reflective of his fighter's age. Sometimes, depending on the wear and tear that you've sustained in the cage, you could actually age quicker than your actual natural age. And I think Robert Whittaker might age out a little sooner by the time he hits his mid-30s. We'll see. Again, he's looking spectacular right now, and he's 31 years old. So what do I expect between Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker in this rematch? Well, you know, one thing that I'm looking at is Robert Whittaker, and this doesn't bode well for Whittaker, he hasn't stopped anybody since he stopped Jacare Souza in 2017. So that is 6 fights, and he's gone 5-1 in his last 6 fights. But in his last 6 fights, Robert Whittaker has not earned a stoppage win. So what does that tell you? Okay, if he's going to beat Adesanya, it almost means, it doesn't necessarily mean, like, he can potentially stop Adesanya, but it's more likely that if he's going to beat Adesanya, that it's got to be via decision. So are you going to take Adesanya down the way that Jan Blachowicz was able to in those final 2 rounds? You would think that that has to be a part of the strategy here for Whittaker, right? Like, if you see Whittaker's latest fight against Kelvin Gastelum, he scored some big takedowns. Yes, he did, in my opinion, win the first and second round, but he took Gastelum down in the first round and for a moment in the second round, and then again in the later rounds took Kelvin Gastelum down. And although I think Whittaker was still winning in the stand-up, the biggest difference was in those key takedowns against Kelvin Gastelum. Well, the problem here is Kelvin Gastelum's about 5'9". Israel Adesanya is 6'4". Whittaker, if you look at the guys he's been fighting, Jerry Cannonier is about 5'11", 6 feet. Darren Till, believe it or not, is only 6 feet. You would look at Darren Till and think maybe 6'2", but no, he's 6 feet. Yoel Romero is about 5'11". So aside from Adesanya, 6'4", the other guys that Robert Whittaker has been fighting in the past few years are like 6 feet or below. So when you look at his fight against Kelvin Gastelum, Whittaker's fight against Gastelum, Gastelum would try to go for a big left hand. Robert Whittaker would be able to slip it and kind of catch him with an underhook and then use that to take him down. Adesanya fights, not only is he taller than Kelvin Gastelum and taller than Darren Till and Jerry Cannonier, but he fights very tall. You know, Darren Till was coming forward on Whittaker too, and Whittaker was able to take Till down. And by the way, I thought Darren Till was pretty much winning against Robert Whittaker before he tore his knee. Like, there was one of those oblique kicks that Robert Whittaker launched against Darren Till. Ironically, Darren Till, or coincidentally, Darren Till launched a similar oblique kick against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that compromised Thompson's knee. And Whittaker landed an oblique kick to Darren Till that compromised his knee. So I thought that the injury to Darren Till's knee basically opened the door for Robert Whittaker to win that fight. I think that it would have been a very different fight had Darren Till not been injured in the last basically 3 rounds at least. Because, again, Darren Till was having some very good success with his tall stand-up style against Whittaker, who's a very good mixed martial artist where you can do some of the grappling, but very good at the striking. But even with Darren Till's fight style, Darren Till comes forward on you more than Israel Adesanya does. Israel Adesanya is more of a back foot fighter, and Robert Whittaker fights very well off of his back foot too. He's a very good counterpuncher. You come in on Whittaker, he'll actually catch you with a straight right. And he's kind of an ambush style fighter where Whittaker will jump in and out of striking range very quickly. Well, that came back to haunt him against Adesanya, again, a back foot fighter who's making a read on your moves and then countering that. He wasn't getting so much of that, he being Whittaker, against Cannonier, Gastelum, Darren Till. Again, Darren Till was kind of the aggressor, and Whittaker was countering Till, especially once, Till had a bum knee. But especially Gastelum being 5'9" and having to be the one against Whittaker to close the distance, where Whittaker is the 6-footer who's able to see Gastelum coming in and counter off that. He's not going to have those same opportunities against Adesanya, who's able to fight tall and make Whittaker have to come to him. Is Adesanya going to give Whittaker the same takedown opportunities? I mean, it's possible. Jan Blachowicz was able to find those opportunities against Adesanya, but those were when Adesanya started to come on kind of heavy with the strikes. Adesanya is going to have to take mental note and make sure that he doesn't come in too hot against Whittaker, and that he continues to fight a patient fight, making Whittaker have to keep on jumping in and out of harm's way to get his strikes off. So I do think that Adesanya is going to fight that more patient fight, as much as he's going to want to start teeing off in the later rounds against Whittaker if he sees that Whittaker is starting to fade or whatever. But it's those aggressive moments against Whittaker that Whittaker can secure a takedown and basically steal a round by keeping Adesanya on the mat. So I would imagine Adesanya wants to reduce those opportunities for Robert Whittaker, which means that for Whittaker to pull off a 5-round decision against Adesanya, if he's not able to take him down, that means that he's going to have to outbox, kickbox him over the course of 25 minutes. Yes, maybe if he could secure one takedown in any one of the 5 rounds, then that could hopefully, for his sake, steal a round. But if he's not able to take Adesanya down multiple times, in multiple rounds, I don't love his chances winning a decision against Adesanya in a kickboxing fight over the course of 5 rounds where Adesanya has the 4-inch height advantage. Again, he doesn't give up that height in his fight style either, in the way that Darren Till kind of does. I think that Adesanya is going to fight a very patient fight and, allow this to become a boring fight if need be. He's going to, I believe, make Whittaker have to make a move and then run into the line of fire. And that doesn't bode well for Whittaker. So I think that Adesanya wins this one. I'm going to give Whittaker the benefit of the doubt and say that he doesn't get stopped. Now, if he doesn't get stopped, then that to me would mean that Whittaker kind of acquiesced to Adesanya's strategy and didn't want to get stopped. He, being Whittaker, didn't want to get stopped and therefore takes his foot off the gas, stops jumping into harm's way, and is, for lack of a better term, satisfied with losing the rounds against the patient Adesanya. If Whittaker does keep his foot on the gas, that's where I think he opens himself up to an Adesanya stoppage. It's just hard to see the path to victory for Whittaker. As great as he is, I just think Adesanya is a bad matchup because not only is he tall, but again, he fights tall and is patient, and Whittaker's style requires him, especially against a much taller fighter, to jump in the pocket. And I think that Whittaker, not that he's not going to want to keep his foot on the gas, I just think that even though Adesanya might stop Whittaker, I think that it's more likely that Adesanya wins a not boring, but not totally explosive and action-packed decision win. I've got Adesanya via decision against Robert Whittaker here. But yeah, let me know what you think. If Adesanya wins this, what do you do? I mean, you've basically cleaned out the division if you can basically beat the next best guy in the division twice, and that will be what he would have done if he beats Robert Whittaker here. So yeah, let me know what you think about Adesanya versus Whittaker 2, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.